In the vastness of the galaxy, civilizations thrived across countless worlds. Some were peaceful and advanced, others more aggressive and protective of their resources. Among them, Earth was still young, its people filled with ambition and dreams, despite the challenges they faced. But one thing set them apart from the rest of the universe: humanity's unwavering belief in doing the right thing, even when no one else would. It had been months since the first distress signal reached the United Earth Federation. The message came from a planet in a distant corner of the galaxy, a planet known as Lyra IV. Once home to an advanced civilization, it had fallen into ruin after a cosmic anomaly appeared near its orbit. The anomaly was a powerful, mysterious force that began warping the very fabric of space-time. It had started slowly at first, but soon it began to devour the planet's resources, and nothing could stop it. No other race in the galaxy had shown interest in helping. The alien species who had explored the stars for centuries dismissed Lyra IV as a lost cause. The anomaly was unlike anything they had seen before, and they were too afraid to take any risks. They had their own worlds to protect, and the costs of intervening were simply too high. The Galactic Council had voted, and Lyra IV was left to face its fate alone. But Earth was different. Despite being a relatively new player in the galactic community, humans had an unshakable spirit. They didn't see the universe as a place to be feared, but a place to be explored, understood, and, when possible, protected. The leaders of the United Earth Federation gathered in the Great Hall of the Earth Alliance, a large, circular room filled with holographic projections and urgent voices. The decision was made, one that would shape humanity's future forever. They would save Lyra IV. Admiral Sarah Calloway, a leader known for her sharp mind and dedication, stood before the council, her eyes filled with determination. "We cannot turn our backs on them," she said, her voice steady but firm. "This is not just about a planet in need. This is about showing the galaxy that humanity will not stand idly by while others suffer. If we turn away now, we are no better than the civilizations who have abandoned them." Her words echoed through the chamber, and the council members, though uncertain, knew that they couldn't ignore the truth in her voice. They had seen what humanity had done in their own small part of the galaxy. The Earth had come together to face disasters, to rebuild after wars, to fight for justice, even when the odds were stacked against them. Now the question was whether they could do the same on a galactic scale. "We'll send a fleet," Admiral Calloway continued, "and we'll make contact with the survivors on Lyra IV. Our best scientists, engineers, and diplomats will go to them. If there is any way to stop this anomaly, we will find it. And if we can't, we will help them evacuate. They won't be abandoned like so many others." The council hesitated, knowing the risks. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. Humanity would reach out to Lyra IV. As the decision was made, Captain Liam Carter, one of Earth's brightest young leaders, prepared to lead the fleet that would travel to the distant planet. He had known since childhood that he would one day serve the Federation, but never had he imagined a mission like this. His team would face not only the unknown dangers of the anomaly, but also the challenge of winning the trust of a people who had already been left behind by everyone else. "I know this is going to be difficult," Captain Carter said as he gathered his crew. "But this is our moment. The rest of the galaxy may turn their backs on them, but we're different. We don't leave people to die, no matter what the cost." His crew nodded in agreement. They were ready for the task ahead. On Earth, news of the mission spread quickly. The people of Earth, many of whom had never seen another star system, felt an overwhelming sense of pride. They knew this mission was dangerous, but they also knew that humanity's future was not just about surviving. It was about making a difference. The story of Earth's willingness to help would be remembered for generations to come. As the fleet set course for Lyra IV, the people of Earth could only hope they would be able to make a difference before it was too late. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, the galaxy would see humanity not as a newcomer, but as a force willing to fight for the survival of others, no matter the cost. As the fleet made its way toward Lyra IV, the crew of the flagship Pioneer had already begun their preparations. They had never seen anything like this before. The anomaly, a swirling, dark mass in space, grew larger with every passing hour. It was as if the universe itself was unraveling. The Pioneer's sensors, advanced as they were, couldn't fully explain what it was. The readings showed a massive distortion in space-time, one that defied all logic. The stars surrounding it seemed to flicker and fade, as though they were being swallowed by the void. Admiral Sarah Calloway stood in the observation deck, staring out into the dark expanse. The ship's massive engines hummed beneath her feet, but she could hardly focus on anything else. The anomaly was just ahead, and she could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She had never been afraid of the unknown, but this was different. This was something that no one in the galaxy had ever seen or understood. "Admiral," a voice broke her thoughts. It was Commander Ethan Walker, her second in command. He was standing by the data console, looking over the latest reports. "We've picked up unusual readings from the planet's surface. It's as if the anomaly is interacting with the atmosphere itself. The readings are erratic, but something's definitely happening down there." Sarah turned, her expression hardening. "What are we dealing with?" Walker hesitated, scanning the data again. "It's difficult to say. It seems to be affecting the planet's weather patterns, creating violent storms and unpredictable shifts in gravity. But there's something more. The readings suggest that the planet's core is destabilizing. If we don't act quickly, the whole planet could implode." A deep silence settled over them both. Sarah felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The situation was worse than they had imagined. The destruction wasn't just from the anomaly's presence. It was a consequence of something far more dangerous beneath the surface. But they had no choice. They had to act. The crew worked tirelessly, using every tool at their disposal to understand the anomaly. The Pioneer deployed drones to fly into the swirling mass, but the data they collected only made things more confusing. The anomaly was unlike any other phenomenon they had studied. It seemed to absorb any technology that tried to measure it, leaving behind nothing but scattered static. Meanwhile, on the surface of Lyra IV, the planet's inhabitants watched as the skies darkened with the growing influence of the anomaly. Most of them had already given up hope. The leaders of the planet had tried everything to stop it, from scientific experiments to desperate pleas for help. Yet, no one had come, not until now. The survivors of Lyra IV were a people broken by their own hubris. In the past, they had been one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, known for their technological marvels and intellectual achievements. But their greed for power led them to try and control forces beyond their understanding. They had created the anomaly, or rather, had unleashed it from its ancient prison, believing they could harness it as a weapon. Now, it was destroying their world, and they could only watch as their once great cities crumbled under its power. The people of Lyra IV were divided. Some still held on to the belief that their salvation could come from another civilization, while others had lost all faith. There were whispers that it was too late, that no one could stop the anomaly now. In the capital city, a council of surviving leaders gathered to discuss what little hope they had left. They had received word of the humans' arrival, but could they be trusted? "We've heard their ships approach," said High Counselor Nira, her voice filled with disbelief. "Are we really going to let them in? What if they're just another group seeking to take what's left of our planet for themselves?" Her counterpart, General Tarek, shook his head. "We have no choice. If we continue to ignore them, we risk losing everything. Perhaps humanity will be our last chance." But many were reluctant. It had taken them so long to accept their situation, and they were afraid of new threats, even if it came in the form of aid. It wasn't long before news of the humans' arrival reached the people. Some saw it as a ray of hope, while others feared the unknown consequences of allowing outsiders into their homes. Back on the Pioneer, Sarah and her crew had begun their first real contact with the survivors of Lyra IV. Using advanced communication technology, They'd reached out to the leaders of the planet, hoping to form a coalition to deal with the anomaly. The messages were unclear at first. Some responded with hostility, others with desperation. In the days that followed, the Pioneer's crew worked around the clock to prepare for their descent to the planet. Sarah knew the stakes were higher than they had ever been before. The anomaly was a ticking time bomb, and if they failed, Lyra IV would be lost forever. But if they succeeded, they would show the galaxy that humanity had the courage to stand up for others, no matter the odds. The true nature of the anomaly remained a mystery, but Sarah was determined to face it head-on. She had no intention of letting another civilization fall into ruin, not while humanity had the power to do something about it. The question remained, though, would the people of Lyra IV accept their help, or would they push them away in fear of the unknown? The fleet descended toward Lyra IV. Tension built both within the crew of the Pioneer and among the planet's survivors. On board the ship, Admiral Sarah Calloway's mind raced with questions. The mission was no longer just about saving a single planet. It was about proving humanity's place in the galaxy. But the growing opposition to their efforts was becoming more evident with each passing day. The messages from the Galactic Council had arrived, filled with warnings and demands. A coalition of powerful alien species, who had already decided the fate of Lyra IV, were displeased with the Federation's interference. The Sharon, a militaristic race known for their sharp intellect and brutal tactics, had been especially vocal. Their leaders sent an urgent message to Earth, declaring their opposition. "Admiral Calloway, you must understand," said the Sharon diplomat in his cold, clipped voice. "Lyra IV's destruction is a natural consequence. To attempt to stop the anomaly is to tamper with forces beyond your understanding. You risk upsetting the balance of the galaxy. We strongly advise you to withdraw." The warning was clear. The Sharon had no intention of allowing humanity to get involved. But Sarah was not one to back down so easily. The Federation's decision was already made, and it was not one she would reverse, no matter how much pressure was applied. She understood the Sharon's concern, but humanity was different from other species. They believed in action, in doing what was right, even when the odds were impossible. "We are doing what no one else has," she replied firmly. "We are going to save that planet, and no one, not even you, will stop us." The Sharon diplomat's expression hardened. "This will not go unnoticed," he warned before the transmission ended abruptly. On Lyra IV, the situation was no better. The planet's leaders, divided between those who were hopeful and those who had lost faith, now faced the reality of the approaching human fleet. High Counselor Nira stood before a gathering of the planet's most influential figures, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to make sense of the chaos. "The humans are coming," she said, her voice echoing in the Grand Hall. "Some of you believe they can help us, but how can we trust them? How can we trust anyone after all that's happened?" General Tarek, standing beside her, spoke up. "We have no choice. We cannot stop the anomaly on our own. These humans have the technology, and they are willing to risk their lives to save us. We must welcome them." But the room was divided. Some members of the council feared the unknown, questioning whether this human intervention would simply bring more harm than good. They were tired of placing their hopes in others, and part of them still longed for the time when their own civilization had been strong enough to avoid such a desperate fate. Others, however, saw the humans as their last hope. The few who had remained hopeful during the planet's decline knew that there was a chance, if only they could set aside their doubts and work together. The choice was clear: allow the humans to help or face certain doom. Meanwhile, back on the Pioneer, the crew worked tirelessly to find a way to make contact with the planet's leaders. They had been in constant communication, sending probes to study the surface and try to gauge the best course of action. But the anomaly continued to grow, destabilizing the planet's core and causing widespread chaos. The planet's gravity was shifting, creating violent storms and violent earthquakes. Whole cities were crumbling under the strain. Captain Liam Carter watched the reports with a growing sense of urgency. The closer they got to the planet, the more unstable the readings became. He had always prided himself on his ability to stay calm under pressure, but now even he could feel the weight of the situation. "This is worse than we thought," he muttered, his eyes fixed on the holographic map. "The planet won't survive much longer if we don't act fast." Sarah entered the command center, her face grim. "What's the status on the surface? Can we make contact with the leaders yet?" "We're getting through," Carter replied, tapping the console. "It's just that they're hesitant. Some of them still don't trust us. We've been getting mixed signals from the planet. It's hard to know who to trust." Sarah nodded. "We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we don't have time for hesitation. We need them to work with us if we're going to have any chance at stopping this thing." As the Pioneer neared the planet's atmosphere, the tension reached a boiling point. The crew had worked out a plan to land on the surface and establish a base of operations. But the question remained, would the inhabitants of Lyra IV be willing to accept their help? Or would they continue to cling to their doubts, letting the planet die without ever giving the humans a chance? Back on Lyra IV, General Tarek watched as the human ships descended into the atmosphere, their massive forms blocking out the sun. His heart raced as he knew the time for waiting was over. The choice had been made, and it was time for the planet's leaders to put aside their differences. He turned to the Council. "It's time. We either unite with the humans and fight for our survival, or we let our world fall into nothingness." As the Council voted, the future of Lyra IV hung in the balance. The galaxy would soon see if humanity's determination could change the fate of a dying planet, or if they would be forced to witness the end of another civilization. The decision was made. The leaders of Lyra IV had finally agreed to work with humanity. It was a fragile alliance, built on the desperation of the planet's people and the unwavering resolve of the humans. As the Pioneer's fleet landed on the surface of the dying world, the weight of the moment was not lost on anyone. Admiral Sarah Calloway stood on the observation deck, watching the small transport ships descend toward the planet's surface. The view was breathtaking, but the sight of Lyra IV, once a vibrant, thriving world now reduced to a dying husk, was sobering. The skies above were dark with swirling storms, and the land below was cracked and shifting, torn apart by the gravity fluctuations caused by the anomaly. "We don't have much time," Sarah muttered to herself. The situation was critical, and the pressure to succeed weighed heavily on her shoulders. Beside her, Commander Ethan Walker studied the data on his console. "The planet's core is destabilizing faster than we anticipated," he said. "We're talking days, maybe hours before the entire planet collapses in on itself. The anomaly is tearing through its atmosphere, and nothing we've tried so far has made any real impact." Sarah's mind raced, but her expression remained calm. "We knew it would be difficult, but we've come this far. We can't stop now." As the human teams prepared to land, the leaders of Lyra IV, once divided and uncertain, now gathered together with a sense of urgency. High Counselor Nira, General Tarek, and the surviving council members met in a makeshift command center built in one of the planet's few remaining cities. The streets outside were filled with refugees, people who had fled the destruction in search of safety. Nira was the first to speak. "The humans are here. I'll admit, I was skeptical at first, but now we have no choice. Our world is dying, and the only hope we have is to work together." General Tarek nodded, his expression grim. "The humans have resources, technology we don't understand. They have the knowledge to stop the anomaly, or at least slow it down. But we must put aside our fears. We cannot let distrust keep us from acting." The council members, all of whom had once been powerful leaders of their civilization, now found themselves humbled by the situation. Some of them had reluctantly agreed to work with the humans, while others still doubted. But the shared experience of watching their world fall apart had pushed them to set aside their differences. It was their only hope. On the surface, the human engineers, scientists, and military personnel worked quickly to establish a base of operations. They set up communication arrays, deployed drones to study the anomaly up close, and began analyzing the data from the planet's core. The Federation had brought their most advanced technology with them, but even that seemed powerless in the face of the anomaly's sheer force. Captain Liam Carter, leading the ground operations, had no time to waste. The situation was deteriorating fast, and they needed answers. The people of Lyra IV were counting on them, and he couldn't afford to fail. "Commander, what's the status on the anomaly?" he asked, his voice sharp. Commander Sasha Wells, his second-in-command, looked up from her console. "We've gathered more data, but the anomaly's core is fluctuating unpredictably. One moment it's stable, the next it's growing stronger. We can't get a clear reading on it. We've deployed teams to gather more detailed scans, but there's no guarantee that any of our equipment will survive long enough to get the data we need." Liam's jaw tightened. "Then we'll have to get creative. We can't just wait for it to consume everything. We need to find a way to disrupt it. Get me a plan, and make it fast." The clock was ticking, and every minute brought them closer to disaster. But despite the mounting pressure, Sarah and her crew refused to give up. They had come to help Lyra IV, and they would not abandon their mission now. If anyone could find a way to stop the anomaly, it was humanity. Back at the council meeting, the leaders of Lyra IV were discussing their next steps. High Counselor Nira stood at the front, addressing the group with the urgency of the situation. "We've seen what the humans are capable of," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that lurked in her eyes. "But we must offer them everything we have. Our knowledge, our technology, everything we can share. We must work together if we are to stand a chance." General Tarek raised a hand. "There are still those who resist. They believe that the humans are just here to take what's left of our resources. But I think we've all seen the truth. We must trust them. The alternative is worse than any fear we have." The council fell silent. Each leader was weighed down by the gravity of their choice. Would they accept the help of these strangers, or would they continue to fight alone, clinging to a failing hope? It was at that moment that Nira made the final decision. "We will trust the humans," she said, her voice resolute. "We will do whatever it takes to save Lyra IV. This is our last chance." With that, the alliance between the humans and the people of Lyra IV was solidified. There would be no turning back now. The fate of the planet rested in their hands. As the Pioneers' crew continued their work on the surface, they knew the task ahead of them was daunting. But humanity had always been known for its resilience. And if there was one thing they had in abundance, it was the drive to do what others thought impossible. The battle to save Lyra IV had only just begun. The alliance between humanity and the survivors of Lyra IV had grown stronger in the days following their decision to work together. The scientists and engineers from both groups worked side by side, sharing their knowledge, combining their resources, and developing a plan to confront the anomaly. But the more they learned, the more they realized that what they were facing was unlike anything anyone had ever encountered before. Admiral Sarah Calloway stood in the command center aboard the Pioneer, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the anomaly. It was no longer just a swirling mass in space. It had become something much more complex. Its core had begun to pulse with energy, and the entire planet of Lyra IV seemed to respond to it. The gravity fluctuations were growing more violent, and the atmosphere itself was becoming unstable. Cities continued to collapse under the weight of the shifts, and every minute brought them closer to the planet's destruction. "How much longer until the anomaly reaches its critical point?" Sarah asked, her voice calm but filled with urgency. Commander Ethan Walker studied the data. "At this rate, we have maybe 48 hours. The core is becoming more unstable, and if we don't intervene soon, the planet will implode. We need to disrupt the anomaly's energy signature. Nothing else has worked so far." Sarah nodded. The solution was clear, but executing it would be far from easy. The anomaly was a force of nature, something that defied every scientific principle they had learned. It seemed to be alive in a way, changing and adapting with every attempt to understand it. It wasn't just a physical phenomenon. It was something more, and they had no idea what would happen if they tried to interfere with it too much. But Sarah knew that they had no other choice. If they didn't act, Lyra Ivy would be lost, and the consequences for the entire galaxy could be catastrophic. The anomaly was growing, and its reach was expanding. On the surface of Lyra IV, the human and Lyran teams continued to make progress. They had set up several advanced energy reactors and power grids, trying to stabilize the planet's core temporarily. But it was a temporary measure, and they knew that it wouldn't hold for long. The people of Lyra IV were terrified, but they had placed their faith in the humans. Together, they would either save the planet or watch it fall apart. General Tarek was at the forefront of the operation, coordinating the efforts of the ground teams. He stood with High Counselor Nira as they observed the progress on the surface. "We're running out of time," Nira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The humans are doing everything they can, but I fear it may not be enough. The anomaly has already corrupted our atmosphere. If we can't stabilize the core..." Tarek cut her off. "We will stabilize it. We have to. I've seen the determination in their eyes. The humans won't stop until they've done everything possible. They've already saved us once, by coming here. Now it's up to us to keep our side of the bargain." Nira nodded. The fear still lingered in her heart, but she was beginning to see the truth in Tarek's words. The humans had come to help when no one else would. They had risked everything to save a world they had no connection to. It was more than just a mission for them. It was about something deeper, a belief in life, a belief in hope. In the heart of the anomaly, hidden deep within its shifting, unstable core, something was stirring. It was a presence, an intelligence that existed within the chaos. It had been dormant for eons, waiting for a moment like this, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The anomaly wasn't just a force of nature. It was a warning, a challenge, a test, and now it was preparing to make its move. Back on the Pioneer, the crew was busy preparing for the most dangerous phase of their operation. They had developed a plan to send a team into the heart of the anomaly, to plant a series of energy disruptors that could potentially reverse its destabilizing effects. But the plan was risky. No one knew if the energy fields within the anomaly would allow them to survive, and if they couldn't complete the mission, it could accelerate the planet's destruction. Captain Liam Carter stood at the front of the command center, staring at the display. "We're ready," he said, his voice steady. "But we need to move fast. The longer we wait, the worse the situation becomes." "Agreed," Sarah replied. "Once the team enters the anomaly, there's no going back. We'll need to make sure we can support them the best we can from here." Commander Sasha Wells looked up from her console. "We've prepared the transport pods and energy shields. The team will be able to survive long enough to get close to the core, but after that, it's up to them. The energy disruptors will have to be placed directly at the center of the anomaly." The room grew quiet as the crew absorbed the gravity of the mission. They were about to do something that no one had ever attempted before, and they had no guarantees of success. At that moment, Sarah Calloway felt the weight of leadership more than ever before. She had led humanity into countless battles. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that humanity could do more than just fight. They could save, heal, and protect. The transport pods were launched, heading toward the heart of the anomaly. As they approached, the energy fields around them grew more intense, warping space itself. The team inside the pods held their breath as the countdown began. The fate of Lyra IV, and perhaps the future of the galaxy, now rested in their hands. The transport pods moved steadily toward the heart of the anomaly, their glowing shields flickering as they pushed through waves of unstable energy. Each tremor that shook the pods made the crew inside tense, knowing that the smallest failure could mean their end. Captain Liam Carter, leading the mission, sat at the front of his pod, gripping the control panel tightly. Beside him, Commander Sasha Wells monitored the fluctuating energy levels. The closer they got to the anomaly's core, the more erratic the readings became. Shields are holding, but barely, Sasha reported. We're entering the inner field. Radiation spikes are off the charts. Keep us steady, Liam replied, his voice calm despite the tension. We've trained for this. We're not turning back now. Behind them, in the second pod, a mixed team of human engineers and Lyran scientists worked to prepare the energy disruptors. These devices were humanity's best hope for destabilizing the anomaly and restoring balance to Lyra Ivy's core. The devices hummed softly, their lights blinking in rhythm, ready for deployment. Dr. Ilara Vin, a Lyran scientist, glanced at the human engineer next to her. I hope your calculations are as precise as you say, she said, her tone a mix of skepticism and hope. They are, replied Engineer Mark Haddon with a small smile. Trust me, we're good at solving impossible problems. Ilara nodded, her purple eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the pod. Let's hope so. My people are counting on this. Back on the Pioneer, Admiral Sarah Calloway and the rest of the crew monitored the mission closely. The holographic display showed the two pods as tiny blips, moving closer to the anomaly's pulsing core. Around them, the anomaly twisted and turned, like a living thing reacting to the intrusion. The anomaly is shifting, Commander Ethan Walker said, his voice tense. It's almost like it knows we're coming. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Keep the communication channels open. If anything goes wrong, we need to be ready to bring them back immediately. They won't have time for a second chance, Ethan replied grimly. As the pods approached the core, the view outside their windows became a chaotic swirl of colors and light. Space seemed to bend and twist, warping in ways that defied logic. The air inside the pods grew heavy with tension, and every crew member felt the weight of the moment. This is it, Liam said as the anomaly's core came into view. It was a massive, glowing sphere of energy, radiating waves of heat and light. Tendrils of energy arced outward, lashing against the pod shields. Prepare to deploy the disruptors, Sasha instructed over the comms. In the second pod, Ilara and Mark worked quickly, activating the devices and ensuring they were calibrated to the anomaly's unique energy signature. The disruptors were designed to emit a counter-frequency, one that would destabilize the anomaly's core and neutralize its destructive effects. But placing them in the right locations would be a challenge. We're ready, Ilara said, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. The two pods split up, each heading to a designated point around the core. Liam piloted his pod with precision, dodging energy tendrils and navigating through the unstable field. Sweat dripped down his face, but his focus never wavered. We're in position, he said. Deploy the first disruptor. Sasha activated the mechanism, and a small device launched from the pod, embedding itself into the anomaly's outer layer. A pulse of energy rippled outward, and for a brief moment, the anomaly seemed to shrink. It's working, Sasha exclaimed. In the second pod, Ilara and Mark deployed their disruptor at the same time. The two devices began to synchronize, their combined energy creating a stabilizing effect. But the anomaly reacted violently, its core pulsing brighter and releasing a massive shockwave. The pod shook violently, alarms blaring as the shields struggled to hold. We've got turbulence, Mark shouted. The core's fighting back. Stay steady, Liam ordered over the comms. Deploy the final disruptor. Ilara grabbed the last device, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at Mark, who gave her a reassuring nod. We've got this, he said. With a deep breath, Ilara activated the disruptor and launched it toward the core. The device embedded itself perfectly, and a third pulse of energy rippled outward. The anomaly roared, its light intensifying as the three disruptors began to work together. Back on the Pioneer, Sarah watched the readings with growing anticipation. The energy levels are dropping, Ethan reported. The disruptors are stabilizing the core. But just as hope began to rise, a new alarm blared across the command center. The anomaly's energy is spiking again, Ethan shouted. It's not just destabilizing, it's collapsing. Sarah's heart raced. Get the pods out of there. Now. Inside the anomaly, Liam and his team saw the core begin to collapse, its energy spiraling inward. They had succeeded in disrupting it, but the collapse was creating a massive gravitational pull. This is going to be close, Liam muttered as he piloted the pod away from the core. The two pods raced against time, their engines straining as they fought to escape the anomaly's pull. Behind them, the core imploded, releasing a blinding light that engulfed everything in its path. As the light faded, the anomaly was gone. Lyra Ivy's skies began to clear, and for the first time in years, there was hope. But the question remained, had the pods made it out in time? The blinding light from the collapsing core faded away, leaving behind an eerie silence. For a long moment, no one spoke. The crew aboard the Pioneer waited, staring at their screens in disbelief, unsure of what had just happened. Is it over? Commander Ethan Walker whispered, his voice tense with both relief and uncertainty. Admiral Sarah Calloway stood at the front of the command center, her eyes glued to the readouts. The anomaly had vanished, but the data was still processing. She had to be sure. Her fingers tapped on the console as she checked the scans again. It's gone, she said finally, her voice steady but filled with awe. The anomaly is no longer active. It's over. A collective sigh of relief filled the room, but it was followed by an overwhelming sense of disbelief. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity and the people of Lyra IV had stopped the collapse of the planet and neutralized the threat that had been consuming it. The work was not over, but they had bought the planet precious time. Down on the surface, the people of Lyra IV watched in wonder as the skies slowly began to clear. The storms that had plagued the world for so long were starting to fade, and the unnatural gravity shifts were beginning to stabilize. The air felt lighter, and for the first time in a long while, hope returned to the hearts of the Lyran people. General Tarek stood with High Counselor Nira, watching the transformation. For years, they had feared the end of their world. Now, they were seeing a chance for renewal. We've done it, Tarek said quietly, his voice full of awe. It's not just survival anymore. We have a future. Nira nodded, her face filled with emotion. Thanks to the humans, they came to our aid when no one else would. We've been given a second chance. She turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. We must never forget this. Up in orbit, the crew of the Pioneer was still processing the success of their mission. The disruption had been risky, but it had worked. Now, they had to ensure that the planet would continue to stabilize. Sarah Calloway addressed her team, knowing the hard work was far from over. We've saved Lyra IV today, she said, her voice filled with resolve. But there's still much to do. The planet's core will need long-term stabilization, and we'll need to work alongside the Lyran people to ensure their recovery. This mission isn't over, not yet. Captain Liam Carter, who had led the teams inside the anomaly, stood by her side, looking out over the planet. He too was filled with a deep sense of accomplishment, but he understood the importance of keeping focused. We'll do whatever it takes to make sure Lyra IV remains safe. We won't let them down, Liam said. Sarah smiled, proud of her team. Exactly. Together, we've shown what we can accomplish. We've proven that we can do more than survive. We can build something better. Now let's make sure we help them rebuild their world. Meanwhile, back in the command center on the planet's surface, Ilara Vin and Mark Haddon stood side by side, staring at the horizon. They had worked together to deploy the disruptors and save Lyra IV, but they knew their collaboration had only just begun. I never thought we'd make it out alive, Ilara admitted, her voice soft. Mark chuckled. Neither did I. But I guess that's why you never give up, right? Ilara smiled. I suppose so. We've saved more than just a planet. We've shown our people that we can work together, that even when things seem impossible, there's always a way forward. Exactly, Mark agreed. And now we get to help build the future. The humans have shown us that anything is possible. Together, we can rebuild, and we can make things better than they were before. As the hours passed, the citizens of Lyra IV began to gather in the streets, looking up at the clear skies. It was the first time in years that they could see the stars. The air was cleaner, the ground more stable, and the very earth beneath their feet felt alive again. They had survived, and they had a chance to rebuild. The leaders of Lyra IV, Nera, Tarek, and others gathered in a newly rebuilt council hall, ready to chart the course for the future. They had once feared the loss of their civilization, but now they were filled with hope. They had a second chance, and they would not squander it. "We owe everything to the humans," Nera said, addressing the council. "But we also owe it to ourselves to make sure that we rebuild our world with strength, unity, and a sense of purpose." Tarek nodded. "We will never forget what they've done for us. But it's time for us to move forward as equals. Let's build a future where both our peoples can thrive." The council agreed. They knew that it wouldn't be easy, and there would be many challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long while, they had hope. They had found a way to survive. And now, they could create something better. Back in the skies, Sarah Calloway stood on the bridge of the Pioneer, watching the beautiful planet of Lyra IV below. Their mission had been successful, but the journey didn't end here. Humanity had proven to the universe that it was more than just a species of fighters. They were protectors, healers, and builders of the future. "We've done more than save a planet today," Sarah said softly. "We've shown that humanity is capable of things others thought impossible. And this is just the beginning." The stars shone brightly as the Pioneer's engines hummed softly. Humanity had answered the call to save a dying world, and in doing so, had changed the course of history. A new chapter had begun, not just for Lyra IV, but for the galaxy.